This is Andrew Paul Cronin, and you're listening to the Q&A with A.P.C, the show that features conversations with artists, cultural figures, policymakers, performers, and other innovators living in Virginia. Episode 4, Harrington Comics. When Greg Steele turned 30 years old, he decided it was time to stop messing around. Greg Steele is the founder and main creative force behind Harrington Comics. In a little over a year, Harrington Comics and its characters, Stoner Knight, the Marvel Cat Universe, Cat Godzilla, and the anthology book Harrington Comics #1 have crept out of Greg's bedroom to find a loyal and enthusiastic fan base from Norfolk to Richmond to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Much of Greg Steele's best work, however, is not even in print. The webcomic series These Bears Are Happy is a wickedly funny and sharp social commentary provided by two bears. An animated public service announcement Greg made for stand-up comedian and podcast extraordinaire Marc Maron has been viewed thousands of times on the internet. For more information about Harrington Comics, go to harringtoncomics.com, thesebearsarehappy.com, or ask for Harrington Comics at your local comic book store. This episode of the Q&A with A.P.C begins with Greg looking through my comic book collection. The Emerald Dawn, so that was a new, it was just another angle for Green Lantern.
Yeah. I know that's a big deal whenever someone's like, you gotta read a Green Lantern book, and Emerald Dawn is like the go-to one that everyone likes. I think after enough time, you're just like, I've read enough superhero books. Like, I get it. It's like exclusively watching only Western movies. It's like after you've seen like 100 Western movies, it's like, I think it's time to move on, I think.
But don't you feel like most people, when they think about comic books, think capes and masks?
Oh, sure, definitely. That's like, I don't know when that cultural shift will happen, but yeah, when most people think comics, they associate them with superheroes.
So comic books in 2015, what is the percentage of superhero comics to non-superhero comics?
I'm certainly not the authority on that, but if you go to like local heroes and you look at their like stock, the left half of the store is just superheroes. The right half of the store is like assorted fiction, fantasy, sci-fi, genres, actual genres. But yeah, the overwhelming majority, at least half of local heroes. Even local heroes, which is like a store that I think takes some pride in having a good variety of not just superheroes, but autobiographical, historical fiction, nonfiction. There's as many kinds of comics as there are movies or novels. It's literally like if, let's see, how do I...
But is it like, is it what sells? Is it the superheroes what sell like at the movie theater, like the popcorn movies, are sort of what makes the money for the studios?
It's very similar.
Yeah. And then there's also like the more niche films, the art house films that...
Right.
Yeah.
And my realm is art house comics, I guess you could say, where I would definitely fall in that category where I'm really over it. It's like if a film buff right now or an indie filmmaker making indie films and trying to break into the movie business, and they're like, what? This isn't a superhero movie. I guess we're getting to that too. Like superheroes are kind of taking over movies.
Yeah, that's definitely happened.
Well, it's exciting and fun. I mean, I'm talking shit on superheroes.
But you go to
totally. That's how I am, man.
Yeah,
it's super fun.
You liked it?
Yeah, I like it just as much as the next guy, but I understand that it is really frustrating and it completely dominates everything. I mean, it's just like Star Wars, where Star Wars was really great and exciting when it first happened, even though I wasn't quite born yet. When I was a kid, I grew up on Star Wars, and I didn't really realize how some people might have been really bummed out by Star Wars. That it meant that every sci-fi movie, or just every movie after it, would be trying to emulate that and try to bank on that popularity. And superheroes are doing that now. Unfortunately, superheroes have been doing that for the past 80 years in the comics industry. And it's like, Jesus.
So what was your first experience with comic books growing up?
Superhero comics. Just like everyone else, superhero comics. I guess my first experience might have been the X-Men cartoon or the Spider-Man cartoon, like in the really early 90s, or no, even further back, I guess the Ninja Turtles cartoons. Things that I didn't quite realize were comic books because I was too young to care about that.
Like on TV?
On TV, yeah.
Saturday morning
Cartoons. And then I had a friend, or like a friend of a family, who worked at Comics and Things up on like Holland Road, which is now long gone, but he worked there, and he would just bring us, like me and my brother, this like big boxes full of comics. And I thought they were just amazing. I was like, oh my God, this guy's bringing me a whole like tub full of free comics. Not realizing that, oh, this is just what doesn't sell at our store.
The Castaways.
Yeah, this is like the stuff that no one wants. We can't move it. It either goes to the dumpster or to Greg Steele. So that he would bring me a ton of comics. And I think
Were they things like my Tom Sawyer comic that you just saw?
it's actually like a lot of the comics you've got here. Like 80s and 90s Punisher, is I guess some Spawn. I guess they might have overstocked Spawn and Image Comics in general. Like there was a comics boom in the 90s where when Image Comics happened, like they were making more money at comics than anybody else, and like millions of comics were being sold. So, and it was at a point in time when consumers were like, Action Comics sold for like $1 gazillion. They're like, oh my God, I can put my kid through college with comics.
Right. If
I buy Spawn #1 in 20 years, I can put my kid through college. Well, you've got Spawn #1 right here. You can, I don't know, you probably got like $20. It's like, because so many were printed, like Action Comics #1 didn't print many because no one cared about it.
But how did Image Comics break in so big when DC and Marvel seemed to have such a stranglehold? I mean, how did that even work?
Yeah, I don't really know. I guess it took a lot of courage on the part of Image Comics because they were all just like working. They were just artists working at Marvel and DC, and then eventually they were like, we're not getting paid enough, we're not getting enough respect, we don't have enough creator rights and freedom, so we're just going to tell our own stories at our own business and sink or swim however the market dictates.
And so they had a bunch of artists sitting in the house, and they could just crank out characters, and they would go straight to the publishers, and they go straight to the shelves, and it was just sort of, it was probably maybe a quicker, less corporate overhead than Marvel and DC, perhaps.
Yeah, totally. And it still is to this day. Image Comics has the business model that everyone wants. It's, if you get a book at Image, it's like, that's still your book. They will promote it and distribute it, and they get their money, but they're not completely like siphoning their creators the way Marvel and DC do. The Walking Dead, I guess, is a huge success story.
Yeah.
For Robert Kirkman, who was just making comics at Image, and then when the TV rights came out, it's not like Image gets all the money for that. Robert Kirkman is like a gazillionaire because his comic turned into a show, turned into a cultural phenomenon.
So if you write for a publisher, can you write for, are you under contract? I mean, I guess it's individualized, but can you write for, it's not like you work for a studio, because like David Fincher or whomever can
right.
make a movie for Universal and then make one for Warner Brothers.
Oh, sure. That's a good question. At Marvel and DC, they will totally be like, you're working for me. Well, I assume most of the time. I'm not like an expert on like the business stuff, but from what I hear, if you work for Marvel and DC, you're probably contracted.
Right.
Whereas Image is just like, yeah, you can totally, we want you to try out other publishers. That keeps us on our toes. Competition is good. Yeah, if you publish something with Image, you're encouraged. That's totally fine to get your next book published at Drawn and Quarterly or Ad House or Fantagraphics, Top Shelf, Oni. There's a gazillion other third-party publishers who put out great work all the time that no one hears about.
So where did you grow up? Where were you watching these Saturday morning
Virginia
cartoons?
Beach, Virginia, 23464. Yeah, I was born in Rhode Island, but I don't remember that at all because my dad was like a Navy guy, bounced around and stuff. But I ended up in Virginia Beach, and as early as I can remember, that was where I lived. But I had like a few different homes there. Parents divorced. I went to Florida for a short period of time.
How old were you when they divorced?
13, I think.
That's a tough age for that to
yeah,
happen.
it's kind of a tough age. I've, grow up pretty quick if there's a divorce when you're at like an age where you're like not quite like a teenager where you're your own person, but also not quite like a kid where it doesn't matter. There's actually 2 divorces. One of them happened like my bio dad. That was before I could develop memories. So I have no memory of that.
Okay.
The stepdad divorce happened when I was like 13. So it was like, I understood what was going on. I would see both of them, and it was fun. I don't remember it like affecting me.
Who did you stay with primarily?
I was with my mom. Would see my dad on weekends, and yeah. I mean, I don't remember at the time that being like a negative thing, but I guess in retrospect, maybe it did. I started realizing later that I might have been a little different from other kids. Maybe that's fine, like a weirdo.
So what's the story with Bio Dad? Have you found him, or are you interested in?
That's. I'm curious. I know he wants to hang out with me.
How do you know that?
Because my older brother hangs out with him and is like, they're okay. They're tight. They've like squashed it and they're hanging out. Meanwhile, like
is he in Virginia? Does he live around here?
I don't know where he lives. I think he might live on the other side of the country, but I know he visits a lot because my brother still lives in Virginia Beach. He's like 4 years older than me. Yeah, so I know from him that they're like hanging out, but I've never like extended the olive branch or anything.
Right.
Mostly because it's really emotionally exhausting. Like it's just I've already got a dad who's raised me.
So has he extended it to you?
Totally, yeah. Which is somewhat
through
heartbreaking.
Through what form?
Not directly. Probably through my brother. He's probably like, Mike, tell Greg anytime. Like, it's cool. I want to hang out. I'd love to hang out.
It's through a middle.
Yeah.
Third.
So I always get pressure from, like, you ought to see your dad. You always meet your dad. You really get to know him and stuff. And it's like, he might be a really great dude, but like, life's already hard.
Sure.
I've already got enough stuff going on and enough family drama going on that like, well, I don't want to just hang out with him because I'm guilted into it. I want to maybe be at the right moment where I'm genuinely interested.
Right, and you want to find out sort of the story. You want to find out what happens. You want to find out his personality. There's probably some closure that could be had.
Totally,
there
I'm sure a lot of personal growth would happen, and it's probably in my future, I guess. But I don't just extended family. But I think a lot of people are getting used to that. I think the expectation when you're a kid is just to have this like really normal family. One dad, one mom, kid, whatever. And then you kind of realize that more often than not, it's more complicated than that. And accepting that is kind of part of growing up.
So you have an older brother.
Mm-hmm.
How old are you?
I'm 30 years old now, and he is 34.
Do you have a sister?
I don't have any sisters, just me and my brother. And
what does your brother do?
He's a lawyer.
What kind of lawyer?
He's like a patent lawyer, but he's also like an adjunct professor at whatever school takes him. He's the really successful brother. He's like the older brother, golden child type.
Is that how you feel, or is that what people have told you?
Oh, I thought you meant how I feel personally. Like I feel like I'm the successful one. No, that's purely my perspective. But I'm sure if an outside party observed the two of us pretty objectively, he is the more successful person. Like he's the one who wanted to get all the good grades, impress his parents, and he's doing really, really well. He's married. He's got like 3 kids. He has a house. He lives in the suburbs. He's done all the stuff he's supposed to do. He graduated high school. He's done a lot of things that I've not done. Not that I have any. It's not that I'm resentful or that I'm jealous. Like I want those things, but it's that's a very distinct difference between the two of us.
Are you close?
Yeah. I mean, not as close as we were because we grew up. We both have different interests, pursue different lives and stuff. But yeah, growing up, we were like inseparable, best friends.
What is your mom? She live around here?
No, she lives out in Colorado with like her boyfriend, life mate person, someone who is none of my dad's.
So do you talk to your mom?
Yeah, I'm in touch with her. Yeah.
And what about dad, non-bio dad?
Yeah, I'm in touch with him too.
What does he do?
He just retired, just retired. He was a teacher, high school math teacher for gazillion years. Like once he got out of
that's the only way you can retire if you're a teacher.
You have to go
a gazillion years.
But he did it. He pulled it off. He's always been a really hard worker. It's kind of inspiring how busy he keeps. Like he he sings in like choruses, and he goes to symphonies, and he's got very passionate hobbies. He's a very dedicated worker. Very inspiring dude. He's also been through a lot of like marriages. Like he's seen a lot of highs and lows. He's always been cool with me. Like he's always been there for me when I need him and stuff.
What TV shows and movies did you like?
As a kid, it was Fox Kids, Spider-Man, X-Men, Ninja Turtles. Oh my God. There was the Batman animated series was a really big deal. And from what I hear, it was a big deal for adults too.
Yeah, it was pretty critically acclaimed.
I guess you might have been in high school.
Yeah, so I'm 37, so but I knew about it.
I had those cards. I don't know if you remember the card craze of like the early 90s, the collectible like Marvel Topps trading cards. I think that's even before all this comics and cartoons.
They're like baseball cards, but
the baseball cards for comics, where it was like it would have Wolverine on the front with a cool drawing by like Jim Lee or whoever. You flip it over and it's got Wolverine's like Wikipedia page.
Stats.
Yeah, his stats like
adamantium.
Yeah. Tell what his powers were. His intelligence is like 0, but his strength is like 10. Things like that. The best I can say is a Wikipedia page pre-internet. And so you didn't have to read the comics and go through all that work. I could learn all the basics and get caught up with all these characters very quickly. And it was fun to collect them. So before I even read comics, I was just collecting these cards. I think that's how I got interested in comics. And
so you sort of had once you got to the comic books, you sort of had a built-in knowledge of the origin stories and who they were.
Totally. Without ever reading. Like, I really honestly don't know if I ever read a comic from beginning to end and really enjoyed it and like paid attention and didn't just look at the drawings until high school. In high school, I remember very vividly, it was in Florida. I was probably in like 9th grade. And my friend Shannon Gamrell, who was also like an artist type and drew way better than me, brought me a comic. I was like, "You got to read this comic." And I was like, "I'm growing up. I'm not going to read a comic." Because you get in high school and you're like, I'm done with the kids. I don't watch Pooh Bear either. I'm done.
Right.
And she brought me a comic called Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. That's not really a comic or an artist that I really follow anymore, but like at 14, it was like really impressive. Johnny the Homicidal Maniac was like,
I'm not familiar with that.
A very like alternative comics sort of thing. Like it was something I didn't realize there was anything like that. It's a very like gothic comic, very dark humor, very uncensored, lots of cuss words. Again, doesn't really appeal to me anymore, but
at
was
the time
really
it spoke
important.
To you.
Yeah, it was really important, and at that time I was really into like alternative cartoons as well, like proto Adult Swim stuff. Like when Space Ghost Coast to Coast came out, it was really important to me. I don't know if there's any other show like that I can compare it to, but when that came out, that really shaped like my sense of humor and even to a degree like a visual sort of taste. Mm-hmm. I thought Space Ghost was just the best show. Still, that's still the best show.
Did you like Mystery Science Theater
Totally.
3000?
Yeah. I might credit Mystery Science Theater 3000 and maybe a little bit on The Misfits for my obsession with like B movies and bad movies in general. Really fascinated with that. And
so what was high school like?
Kind of weird. I went to 2 high schools in 2 different states. 9th and 10th grade in Florida, Melbourne, Florida. Went to O'Galley High School, and then moved back to Virginia, and continued. As in, like, I spent all of my childhood, like, through preschool, elementary school, middle school, going into Virginia Beach schools with all my Virginia Beach friends, some of which are still my friends today, who are still my friends. And then 9th and 10th grade, that's right after the second divorce. So my mom moved to Florida, and I just had to go with her to Florida. Mm-hmm. And so it was a lot of learning about myself and about the world in 2 years. It was like culture shock. It's a totally different place. Met a lot of new people. I had to like start totally fresh. And then my mom moved back to Virginia 2 years later, and culture shock again.
But divorced kid moving to Florida in high school that's tough times.
Yeah.
That's tough.
I was a very depressed kid.
Did you make friends?
Yeah. I mean, it took me a while. For the most part, I was just really like a reclusive kid, and I was very introverted. I didn't talk to anybody. Was mostly like teased. It wasn't until maybe the end of 9th grade where I met the punk rock kids. and discovered that whole community and that whole culture. And it takes someone sort of like outgoing to kind of unlock that in an introverted kid. I remember it was Steve Price, very specifically. I remember how it happened. I was like in the cafeteria area of O'Galley High School. Steve Price was this like, he was already into punk rock, already knew the kind of people he wanted to find, and was very aggressive in pursuing those friendships. And he just went up to me and was like, "You're my friend now. Here we go. Like, here's all the CDs you need. Here's all the shows you need."
Was he older?
I think he's only a couple months older.
Okay,
same
so he
grade.
wasn't the same grade.
Yeah. So he was a really important person, and he introduced me to a whole bunch of new people.
Who introduced you to different kinds of art forms and different things, different movies, different kinds of music.
Yeah. So a lot of growing very fast. So as much as I hated going to Florida, like I hated it there, by the time it was time to go back to Virginia, I was like, no, I came so far. Like, I already made all these new friends and they all love me and stuff. And then I moved back to Virginia and stuff started falling apart.
So you didn't graduate high school?
I did not graduate high school. I dropped out of high school in my senior year. There was only like a few months left. Like
Why? Why didn't you?
Because I was failing so bad that if I had
But you're a smart guy. Why didn't you?
I'm super smart. I'm like the smartest guy.
But why? But you are a smart guy. I mean, you're.
So. Yeah, my buddy Matt thought the same thing. Like Matt Harrison. Matt was also like an important person when I came back to Virginia. Who was like, he found me.
But was
told
it
me what to do?
What was it? No.
Hold on.
Stop. Was it like a power thing? Was it like you wanted to be in control? Because you could easily have coasted into finishing high school, like academically. My feeling on you is that you could have coasted through.
Yeah.
And finished.
I not really, because I had already kind of made my bed. Like I'd already like failed so much that if I continued through high school,
because you skipped,
it would have meant like summer school. It would have been I'd spend a 5th year in high school. It would have meant, and it was just because I wasn't paying attention. I was disinterested, disconnected, and I just didn't.
Did you get in trouble?
No, other than
like behavior wise.
Behavior wise was the only thing I excelled at. It was that Greg just doesn't do his work. Like Greg just doesn't care.
You're more of an English person than math?
I'm none of those things. There was no I remember specifically in like elementary or middle school, they had this like video they made where they go to all the kids and like, what's your favorite subject? And they'd ask every kid, and I was the one kid at the end of the video that was like, recess is my favorite. They're like, that doesn't count, Greg. And he was like, no, recess is my favorite one.
But see, this is what I'm saying. I feel like you say recess. Recess is not your favorite. But you said recess because you wanted to have, it was some kind of dig your heels in the sand and move on. I don't want to talk about this.
Yeah. So
move on, like a deflection thing.
Oh, yeah. I definitely had like my guard up.
But like I've spent.
My form of rebellion was just do nothing, shut down. Like, I would rather spend my whole school day daydreaming than focusing, or even doodling, I guess.
Did you get pressure from your parents about this?
Oh yeah, I mean they were very concerned because I started getting bad grades. I think in middle school, I started getting bad grades, and like, what's happening? Why isn't Greg doing well? And I just couldn't bring myself to care about it, and I don't know what caused that. I remember telling my dad about it. He was like, "Greg, what's going on? Like, I know you're smart. Why aren't you doing this?" And I was like, no matter how hard I try, it would be false for me to like pretend to care about school. And he was like, "Yeah, but you got to go to school and you got to do well so you have a good life later." And I was like, I remember telling him I felt that disconnect. Like, how does paying attention at school mean succeeding or having a good life or not being poor later? It just didn't add up for me. I didn't get it. And I don't know why. I mean, I get it now because I have a job and I went to college somehow. But at the time, it was like, I just hated it. It was the worst.
GED? No, none of that.
I got a GED.
You did?
I did. I put forth the absolute minimal effort. It was like, okay, I go get a GED. That takes like an hour.
So was that how far after when you would have graduated high school did you get your GED?
It was immediate. I think I dropped out like the February of 2003. So I was like a few months from graduation. I just dropped out, got my GED probably that week, got a job at a retail store that summer. I think I lived in my dad's apartment in that period of time. And then by the end of 2003, like Elena graduated and moved up to Virginia, and we got our own apartment. And then I was super happy. I was like, once that happened, and I don't know, that sounds really shitty to say that it was because of distance from like my family and from being controlled. Maybe I was just wanting control over my life or something. But yeah, I was instantly happy and totally cool with doing the work I had to do. Like it made sense to me. If a man with money says, lift these boxes, I'll give you money. I was like, this makes total sense. This is totally different from school where it's just, I don't know. It made sense to me and I could wrap my head around it rather than like, I have to memorize this date in American history in order to get money to live my life or something. So, I don't know.
So you worked at the Virginia Beach Oceanfront at Holiday, which is like a flip-flop shop.
Oh, yeah. We couldn't believe someone put us in charge of a building and a business, and
it was like Sensations for
Sensations, or like it was a tourist trap store,
right?
But it was a very big store. It was so big, and there was just all these toys to play with, and we were like 19, and we suddenly were given all of this control over our lives, not only where we were living and school and stuff, but like we were making money just goofing around at this store. And it was just, the temptation was too high. So we got into a lot of like trouble.
One of the things my wife would talk about when she talks about Holiday is that people would poop in the dressing rooms.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of frequently.
I am.
Because, did you experience the poop?
I experienced the poop. I have one specific poop story. Oh man, I hope I remember this, how to tell this story the best. It's really revolting. We didn't have a bathroom for our guests. We were told by our bosses not to let them into the stockroom bathroom because they might steal stuff or something, and there were some people who they need to go to the bathroom, and I wouldn't let them because I was like, fuck you, this is my place, you can't use my bathroom. We all just agreed they can't use our bathroom, and I was behind the counter running the register, and the dressing rooms are way in the back of the store, but you can see them from the register, like off in the distance. This one older woman, I assume she has some trouble, she came up to the counter, bought her stuff, was with her family. Nothing seemed urgent. There was no urgency in her mannerisms or whatever. She just walked up, bought her stuff, and said, do you have a restroom? And I said, no, sorry. Very politely. I didn't say, like, fuck you, go to hell. It's just like, sorry, no, we don't have a restroom, but there's one, like, across the street or something. So I was totally...
It's down like 17th Street.
Yeah, yeah. Ours was on 12th Street at the oceanfront. When I told her, no, I'm sorry, we don't have a bathroom, but there's one across the street, she said, oh, okay, I'm not going to make it. Very, very calmly, like, I'm not going to make it, And I was like, oh. And she just walks away. And I'm busy. There are more people making me do work. I can't, I'm sort of like, did she just say that? Did she just say she's not going to make it? It didn't, the tone sounded like she had her shit together. I was going to say that she was under control. Shit together is more appropriate. She walks away from the counter, makes the left, goes straight to the dressing rooms, and then it hits me. I'm like, oh no, is this happening? Is this really happening? She goes into a dressing room, and I start panicking. I start telling, like, I don't know if Ashley was there that day, but like either like John Schilling or Matt Harrison or someone. Oh my God, I think someone's going to take a shit in our dressing room. What do we do? And she opened the dressing room, went in, opened the dressing room again, walks out, just walks straight out the door, tells her family, we got to go. And they're like, what's up? Like, no, we just have to go now. It's all good. And so they just leave. And I'm like, oh my God. Okay, I got to go check up on that. Like, I can't believe, even though in the back of my head, I knew she took a shit in the dressing room. It's like, there's no way. That real life isn't like this. Mm-hmm. I was very naive. I was like 19 or 20. And people don't just shit anywhere. That doesn't happen.
That's what they teach you in high school.
Yeah, and maybe she dropped out too. I certainly didn't just shit anywhere. I've got that together. I can't believe that would really happen.
So you went back.
And
did it have like a curtain, like a shower curtain? There was like a big reveal.
It wasn't. I wish it was that dramatic. Where like pushed it open really fast and da-da-da.
Yes.
No, it was more like I just opened it very slowly, creak, and it was. This dressing room is set up so that in the corner, there's a little seat, like a little triangle-shaped seat in one of the corners. It seemed like she was aiming for that. And that's like a flat surface that maybe you could clean easily.
Well, it's kind of like a seat.
It's like a seat.
It's got like a bathroom seat.
It's familiar. It's comforting for her. Makes her feel like maybe she's not shitting in public.
The squat position.
Yeah. it seems like the intent was to land there, but there's a carpeted floor beneath that. So what happened, I wish there was a visual aspect to this podcast so that you could see what I'm gesturing here. There's the seat, and then there's the poo coming down, and when it makes impact, it's just on the edge, so it like cuts it in half. Yes. So half of it is up on the seat, the other half just goes boom on the floor, and it was like everywhere, and it was
loose,
very, very loose. Just the worst. I remember wasting a lot of time in my 20s. I remember not having like a hobby or a passion. I remember not working very hard. I just kind of meandered for a long time. It wasn't until like I was about to turn 30 where I was like, oh, maybe I should have like a thing that I do that maybe people would know me for. Or maybe I should work hard at something.
So beginning,
I never studied.
So beginning in August 2010, you began publishing the web comic. These Bears Are Happy.
Oh, was it August? You did research. You're a good podcaster. Good job.
Which is it's two bears. It's starring two bears, and the bears sort of go back and forth, kind of bouncing theories and ideas off each other.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, totally. They're both me. Well, okay, maybe not. Sometimes they're both me just talking to myself. And sometimes one of them is me and the other is some opposing argument that I disagree with, and I have them kind of work it out.
Some of the other topics include labeling people, God, evolution, mom jokes, time travel, gravity, racism, homophobia, stereotyping. And that's basically the first 11 issues of the webcomic. And I felt later issues have a little more detail in the background.
You could maybe read them a little easier. I remember, and this is really important, that you have friends who tell you when it sucks. Like I would have friends tell me, Greg, keep going. That's really great that you're doing what you're doing, but I can't read it. Like your handwriting is really sloppy. And at the time I was like, fuck you, go to hell. This is my art. In the long run, it's really helpful. I want to thank everyone who's ever been mean to me. Because then that's when I started taking the lettering seriously. That's when I treated the words like an extension of the drawing. Like it's a drawing. When I draw a letter, it should be taken as seriously as the rest of the drawing. And in backgrounds, I try to draw backgrounds more. But the bears themselves are the same. They do not gain detail.
You have a thing at the end called Greg Notes.
Yeah,
which is a little bit. It's a comment on yourselves.
Yeah. So my opportunity to be self-critical or like.
So did you have the idea to add that at the beginning for the first issue, or did you draw it and then you felt like, oh, maybe I need a little something at the end, or was it all one idea from top to bottom?
It's absolutely a part of the comic. The comic doesn't. It's like the punchline in a lot of cases where like the Greg notes are really important.
There's some links to different sites that kind of extend
the humor. Yeah, I don't know. It was just another tool to either tell a joke or to tell something personal or express something. So like, yeah, it was right there, right from the start. And it wasn't a super conscious thing. It was just, I had something else to say about the comic that I didn't want to be part of the comic's narrative. I wanted it to be objective.
Where can people find These Bears Are Happy?
TheseBearsAreHappy.com. I mean, I'm sure you could search on the internet and find like a Reddit page where someone shared it.
So These Bears Are Happy continued up until around 2013. And you attended the Small Press Expo in Maryland around 2013.
I think that was the first year I attended, yeah.
And did you go in part because you love comics and you're a fan, but was there also a little bit of you sort of kind of looking to see what the different types of what people are offering up and sort of the quality and what was being exhibited? Yeah. Like, was there sort of like a reconnaissance element to it too? Yeah,
like what are these people doing? And I remember thinking maybe that's where I belong. I don't know, before Small Press Expo, I don't remember being that into alternative comics. I don't even remember being that into comics. It was just something I did with Matt. Like, Matt needed someone to talk to him about this old Daredevil book, so I would have to read it and be able to talk to Matt about what happened in it. And before I knew it, I was like going to all these comic stores and really developing an appreciation for illustration, but not necessarily like Marvel and DC books. Like I never became like a big fanboy of that. I mean, I enjoy them. I I enjoy the Marvel movies. I enjoy like the history of these character archetypes, and it's all fun and stuff. But like there was something missing. There was like, where are the rest of them? Where are the rest of the comics? And we went to Heroes Con in I think 2010, 2011 or something. The Heroes Con is in North Carolina, and we went there because Mike Mignola was there. And Mike Mignola, out of all of the mainstream comics, his were the most appealing and the most artistic and the most interesting. He draws like Hellboy. His art's incredible. I loved it, and it was weird, and it was horror, and I was like, there's got to be more stuff that I'm just not finding. At Heroes Con, we went there because he was there. I wanted to meet him. And we did. It was fine, whatever. He had a line out the door. But then there was a section carved out of the middle of the convention floor called Indie Island, which still is there today every time you go to Heroes Con. There's Indie Island. And that's where all the underground artists, the alternative comics guys go. And we just kind of stumbled onto that. I wasn't really pursuing it. And I was like, oh my God, these are people like me. And it was very similar to finding like punk rock or indie rock or finding an indie film. It was like, oh my God, I didn't know this existed. I didn't know anyone else was interested. And it was kind of mind-blowing. So then I pursued other...
Florida high school all over again.
Yeah, it was another like really enlightening experience. And those artists were like, if anyone's interested, the specific artists that were inspiring were Dustin Harbin, Kate Beaton. There was a bunch of them. There was probably like 30 artists or something. I couldn't believe it, and it was mind-blowing, and I bought all their stuff. And that kind of sparked the interest in going to conventions. I was like, are there other conventions like this? Small Press Expo is just an entire convention of Indie Island. There are no superheroes at Small Press Expo. It's only underground or third-party published comics. It's really, really nice. I can't recommend it enough. Even if you're not into comics, just art, illustration, weird art, if you're interested in anything like
There's
that.
Posters, sort of one sheets.
Yeah,
like that.
they're called prints.
Prints.
Art prints. Or
of which you have
many.
Nice.
My apartment is covered in them.
It's one thing though to sketch, and it's another thing to develop a character or to design your own comics.
Yeah.
But it's an entirely different thing to sort of believe in your creation and ideas so much that you think they deserve to be shared with people. And so what was that? Because you made that jump.
Yeah. Very recently made that jump. That was, it takes some courage and ambition, which I was not accustomed to. I've never been a go-getter. I've never been someone who puts myself out there. But there was one of those rare times in my life where I was like thinking about my future and like, who do I want to be and how do I want people to perceive me? And I want to be part of something bigger than myself. And I think that was it. And it was really inspiring seeing all those underground comics people because it was attainable. It seemed kind of doable. It's like when I was a kid, I was probably like 12 or 13 and I first saw Clerks. And it was like, this guy just had a camera. And it was at his store that he worked at. Like, he had no budget, nothing. And the lack of style and the lack of flair and the lack of technical skill was the whole charm. Right. Like, that's like part of the aesthetic. That's part of what made it appealing. It's because it was accessible and relatable.
Pulled no punches.
It was raw. And that's exactly what indie comics are. They are the rawest, like, pure version of this art form. And calling it an art form is also something relatively new. Like, respect in comics, like, the fact that they don't have to be this, like, children's, like, drivel is... I don't know if it's relatively new, but although in Europe, comics are respected. Like, if you go to France, comics are not treated the same way they're treated here. They're treated as a medium, just like film or novels.
Harrington Comics #1 came out in October 2014. It's an anthology comic. It's a collaboration with you and Matt Harrison and also Todd Webb. And Matt Harrison has two, he has the Harrington origin story, which is named for a house on Harrington Avenue in Norfolk, Virginia. Harrington Comics 1 starts with a comic by Matt called Potential, which is about living up to the potential that people see in you, but also the potential that you have for yourself. And I love that.
It's my favorite thing he's ever done by pretty wide margin. I love everything Matt does. He's the best. But that comic, that wasn't made specifically for Harrington. That was the only one in that book that was already made. I think he made
Did you have to
that.
twist his arm to get him to put that in, or did he volunteer that one? Because it's a pretty it's personal.
I expected to have to twist his arm because it is very personal, but he put it out himself either a few months before Harrington or maybe a year before it. He put that out there, and it was very, very vulnerable. Like, it's very exposed. He was like really expressing himself like you do in art or whatever. And it was kind of powerful and touching and relatable. When we were putting together comics for this thing, like, I only had 3 people. Matt, when he makes comics, they're very dense. So like that Harrington Comics Origins thing is 2 pages. And I was like, well, I want to fill this thing out more. And potential was the best. It's also only 2 pages, and I want it to be right in the front. It's kind of crudely drawn. It's very like alternative comics. It's very personal, autobiographical, and it's just right out the gate. I wanted Harrington Comics to maybe serve the same purpose that like Johnny the Homicidal Maniac was for me, where someone would open up and be like, "That's a comic? You're allowed to do that? It's allowed to be this like simple. It's allowed to be this personal, and it's allowed to be that genuine and weird." And Matt's did that perfectly. I think it immediately would just say, this is for alternative comics people right out of the gate. And it's also very short. You can consume it in like 30 seconds or something.
Todd Webb contributed The Continuing Adventures of Catherine Mansfield, which is basically follows a girl or a woman and her inner thoughts and feelings. She sort of lives alone in an apartment, and she's gazing out the window and sort of ruminating
that's a weird
on
one.
her.
That's also very much like screams alternative, because it's, when I first read his Catherine Mansfield comic, I was like confused and I didn't get it, but the art's beautiful. He's really gifted. I would take anything I could get from Todd because he's amazing. When I read it, I didn't understand it at all. I was just like, whatever, it looks great. I mean, I'll put it in here. Turns out Catherine Mansfield is an actual poet. She actually lived and wrote poetry, and I think at some time in her life, she started doing whatever the equivalent of blog posts was back then, like tweets, like very short sentences that were like diary entries. What Todd did is he took those diary entries and adapted them. So it was like all those words that are in his comic, she actually wrote, and he just put them to pictures in like a comical sort of way.
And Harrington Comics 1 also includes Heat Death by You. The title of Heat Death takes up a whole page, and it's all black.
Yeah.
And then the lettering is in white. Magic marker, or how do you color something in that completely black?
I might have filled that in just in Photoshop with like a black fill feature, but that's not what I like to do. I like it to be like textured. I think that was filled, but if you look in like the very last page of Heat Death, it also ends on a completely black page. But it looks, there's like little marks. It looks textured. That's because I actually did use like either a marker or a brush pen and just did the work and filled in the whole thing black. So it would feel textured and non-digital. That's actually a really important thing, to be as not digital as possible and to make it look like a doodle. Because again, that's what resonated with me about indie comics, is when they looked like a doodle, like a notebook doodle from like high school or something.
The MCU, the Marvel Cat Universe, a collection of Marvel heroes drawn as cats, which was an exclusive for local heroes here in Norfolk for Free Comic Book Day.
That was great.
So there's 17. It's about 17 or so Marvel characters with cat faces doing cat-like things, but wearing superhero costumes, and they're set in that particular superhero's setting.
Yeah, usually. Well, it was Free Comic Book Day. Excited to table there because the local heroes is my favorite store. It meant a lot to me, and I wanted it to be fun. Like, I wanted to provide something and something free. So I was like, I'm going to make a free zine or something that I can give away to people. Greg Thompson at Local Heroes. I'd already drawn something, Cat Godzilla, just for fun. And that did pretty well at like shows and stuff. He was like, oh, you should just draw cat superheroes. And I was like, okay. But that seemed fun. I draw cats all the time. That seems totally fun. I can imagine kids really getting a kick out of that. And it also kind of bridges the Marvel fans and the alternative comic stuff. It can kind of, this can be them dipping their toes into the Harrington Comics water, I guess. And
would you say cats are the one thing that you have drawn the most of?
Probably. It's not what I intended to draw the most, but I think because people ask it. Like,
But you like cats. You have cats.
Oh yeah.
And you have 2 cats now?
2 cats, Ripley and Kirby. One's big, one's small. The big tough one is the girl cat, and the little tiny timid one is the boy cat, because like fuck gender norms, I guess. They're very progressive cats.
You made a public service announcement about cats for Marc Maron.
Oh yeah, and PETA, yeah.
Where you work. Did you write? Who wrote the script for that?
I don't know. Someone at PETA, I guess, or actually maybe it was Marc Maron. I think maybe Mark. They were like, I don't have the actual story, but I'm pretty sure it was something like they contacted him because he's like a cat enthusiast, and they're like, "Do you want to do a thing about spaying and neutering cats?" And I'm pretty sure he just went off the cuff and recorded this quick thing, and so they brought it to me, and they're
What's your job at PETA?
My job is video editor. Well, I'm one of many. I'm pretty low on the. I'm not like an expert video editor, but put videos together at the PETA office, and it's usually like cruelty footage or PSAs of some kind. But my boss, thank you, he saw the Monrovia video that I made. It was like, it looked sort of stop motion animation, like it was like just doodles, a series of doodles put together, and weird. It was just weird stuff. Not intending for that to go anywhere or for me to get into animation, but my boss ended up seeing it and was like, "Oh, we should try to like get Greg to exercise that muscle more and try to see what he can do." And so they had this Marc Maron radio PSA, but they wanted a visual element, and he was like, "Let's let Greg make a weird cartoon and put it over top."
And that was probably one of the things that I came across. That video has the most detail, particularly in the background of any of the stuff that I've seen from you.
Yeah, I really wanted it to be good. I remember.
Have you gotten any feedback from him?
Yeah, he loved it. Marc Maron really liked it.
And how did he convey that?
It was like an email. I think like PETA was in contact with him. Like they sent him the video, and he responded with like, "This is awesome," and all of his people thought it was awesome. I storyboarded the whole thing in little thumbnail doodles and everything and descriptions, and I submitted that, and it was approved. I was shocked. Like, it's pretty weird.
You submitted it to PETA or to Marc Maron?
To PETA, to my boss, to my manager. It's on YouTube. You can YouTube Marc Maron, PETA, cats or something. I'm sure that would work.
Yeah, that works.
The cartoon is like exactly what I storyboarded. Almost exactly what I storyboarded, which was really validating and very satisfying. And I think it came out pretty well. At the time, I couldn't believe I was doing it, or that I could do it, and that my boss and my job would accommodate my personal passions. Like it was a really weird time and really exciting.
It has great sound effects also.
Thank you. Yeah, I did all the sound too, apart from him speaking. If there's any sound effects, it was also me.
There's some cleavers and stuff. Is there a secret or a shortcut to drawing a hillside full of skulls?
I've kind of worked myself into a corner there because I just love piles of skulls so much. No real trick to it, I guess. Just draw the big skull in the foreground, like in the corner first. Work your way back.
Do you go back and read over what you've done? Look over what you've done? And have
totally.
some sort of feelings for good or bad?
I'm way too like self-critical to not go back and reread everything. Like I'll read Stoner Night pretty frequently because I want to find out. Like, in fact, anytime someone tells me, "Oh, I read Stoner Night," I'll be like, "Really? Why? Oh, why?" And then I'll go back home, read it, pretending I'm a stranger.
Like, what are they seeing?
What could they possibly be seeing in this? Like, what about it would appeal to that person? Or especially if I know the person, or I know what they're into, I'm like, what did they find? What about this like spoke to them? Or I'll ask them too, like, what about it was worthwhile to you? Like, what worked and what didn't work? All of that's really important to me.
What's next for Harrington Comics and Greg Steele?
As far as like books go, most of that is just on the spot. Like if like that doodle zine was just kind of like that's not like a planned Harrington Comics release. It's just something slapped together for a show.
But I feel like I want more Stoner Night, and I'm not saying
Right.
that as a joke. I'm saying I like the character.
That's
I think
awesome.
it's funny. And I think
Thank
it's
you.
really original. And
That's
I think there's a
awesome.
lot of people who feel the
Yeah.
same way.
I mean, I was shocked that it did as well as it did. I probably brought like 30 comics to Richmond Zine Fest expecting 2 of them to sell, and they all sold when it debuted. Like people have been really nice to me about it, and they've really...
Have you extended the story?
Yeah, I have other stuff like planned for Stoner Night, but I also... I'm trying to be very careful because I've been very critical of sequels and prequels and crap from other storytellers who I admire, and I'd rather Stoner Night just die now and be this one interesting thing I did and have people imagine other adventures than to put out a bad one or put out one that's like, oh, I should have just let it be. But I do have other stories and adventures of his in mind, and I actually do have one short, like 1-page Stoner Night that I want to submit to Work magazine if they're willing to have it. That one's already penciled. I just have to ink it. So yeah, I'm not done with Stoner Night, but don't hold me to that. I might change my mind and be like, fuck 'em, move on to something. I have plenty of other ideas for comics in mind that I don't really talk about because if I talk about them, I lose steam for them, which is kind of weird, maybe a personal flaw. But like, if I start telling people this is what I'm gonna do and I'm gonna like, I end up like, oh, I already told them about it. There's no point in doing it. Like, save your chi and just like funnel it through the art. When it's done, then you can hype it up.
I'm really glad that you came in, and I'm really
Yeah.
glad that you didn't refer to them as drawings, because I feel like when you refer to it as that, you're playing it safe, and I feel like
Yes.
it diminishes your art, and you have a real gift, and I appreciate you coming
Thank
on.
you.
This is Andrew Paul Cronin, and you've been listening to the Q&A with A.P.C. To hear archived episodes, go to soundcloud.com/QAAPC or subscribe to the show on iTunes. For exclusive content, including upcoming shows, behind-the-scenes pictures, and more, follow the show on Instagram at instagram.com/QAAPC. The executive producer of the Q&A with A.P.C. is Ben Riley.